wonderful people. Before I get started on Cynthia Anderson's case, I have some bad news about a missing persons case I covered a while back. It involves Abdi Shareef. He's 17 years old and he went missing from Des Moines in January of this year. On May 2nd, they found a body in the water at Prospect Park. Now, Prospect Park is the same park that search parties for Abdi combed several times. It's also where his cell phone last pinged the day that he went missing. On May 4th, they released that it was Abdi Shareef. I can't imagine what his family's going through. I do know they're pushing for the full autopsy to be released because they want to know what happened to their son, and that's understandable. From what I understand, when they found him, there was no signs of a struggle, no signs of foul play. The preliminary autopsy shows that there's no traumatic injuries, and I don't know if it's rude to speculate on what happened, but I do have a theory that I'd like to share. I personally think that it happened the day he went missing. I think he lied about what time he got off because he was a teenager, and it seems like his home life might have been a little bit on the strict side, and I think there was an accident. I think he was crossing the water or he was doing something that resulted in an accident and in him drowning. But again, that's just my theory, and if it's rude for me to speculate, I apologize greatly. I would like to point out that there was a blizzard that day, and it had snowed several times after it, so it's not a surprise that it took all these months to find his body. I think it's a lot like the Hunter Klomstra case from Michigan. He went missing on New Year's Eve, and it turned out he ended up drowning in the river behind where the house was, but they didn't find him for months. If the autopsy is publicly released, I will keep you updated. Now on to Cynthia Jane Anderson, or Cindy as her friends and family called her. 20-year-old Cindy went missing on August 4th, 1981 from the office she worked in Toledo, Ohio. Cindy was born February 4th, 1961. Her family were and are devout Christians. They're fundamentalist Christians, and religion was a big part of her life. She grew up in Michigan. From what I understand, she lived in Lambertville, Michigan at the time of her disappearance. She lived with her parents. To give you an idea, because that might be confusing that she worked in Ohio, but Toledo, Ohio is only about 20 minutes away from Lambertville, give or take. Cindy had two brothers, Mark and Jason, and a little sister, Christine. And Christine is still an advocate for her case. Life was going great for Cindy. There were new opportunities on the horizon for her. She was surrounded by friends and family that loved her. She even had a boyfriend who they were discussing that summer about getting engaged. I mean, life was good. She worked as a legal secretary in a law office in Toledo, Ohio, and she loved her job, but she was looking for something a little different. And I think it was 2 or 3 weeks after her disappearance, she was supposed to attend a college Bible school with her boyfriend, a college that he was attending already. Everything would change that hot, sticky August day. She skipped breakfast that morning. She needed the extra time to get ready for work. She left around 8:30 in her white Chevy Citation. The last known sightings of her were around 9:45 a.m. I am a little confused about the last sightings because from what I understood, the last sightings at around 9:45, they saw her at work. So I don't know if they saw her in the building, or I don't believe it. Maybe it was one of those strip malls, or maybe it's one of those big buildings where several offices are in. I'm not sure. I didn't fully understand because she was alone in the office and she was the one that opened the office every morning by herself. I do know that around 10 a.m. There were a few clients that reported that they tried to call the office, but there was no answer. So it seems like it took literally 15 minutes for Cindy to vanish into thin air. Like I said, Cindy always opened the office up, and I believe she was usually there for a few hours alone before anybody else came in. So when her coworkers came in around 12:30, there was a little bit of concern. Not a lot, but there was a little bit. The radio was on, and the desks and chairs were set up for the day, a chore that Cindy did every morning. She would also get the mail every morning, but the mail was shoved in the front door handle on the inside. Her purse and keys were gone, but strangely enough, her car was still parked in the employee parking lot. Normally when she would leave for errands, she would leave a note, but there was no note to be found, which is what concerned her coworkers. There's also a strange fact that's often mentioned about her case is there was a romance novel that she had been reading for a while. It was open and sitting on her desk, and where it was opened at is a scene in the story where a woman gets kidnapped by knife point. Cindy's coworkers decided to wait a little bit to see if maybe she was running errands and just forgot to leave a note. But by about 2 hours later, around 2:30, she still wasn't there, so now at this point they were really concerned and they called 911. From what I understand, she left a large amount of money behind. Now I don't know if that was in a checking account or if it was cash she had at home or what, but she did leave a large amount of money behind, and her social security number hasn't been used since. Leading up to Cindy's disappearance, there was a lot of strange occurrences in her life. It is reported, and I think it's by her sister Christine, that at the time she kept having reoccurring nightmares where she was being kidnapped by a strange man. And then one day a client reported he watched her answer the phone at the office, and this scared look came across her face, and within a minute she hung up the phone. The phone immediately rang again, which she answered it again, and she got even more scared and hung up the phone again. But when the client asked her if she was okay, all she would say was that she was just fine. Across from the office that Cindy worked at was a strip mall, and one day on the side of the strip mall, on the wall that faced her window by her desk, somebody had spray painted, "I love you, Cindy, GW." Now, she couldn't think of anybody she knew with the initials GW or anybody that would do something like this. But it's also thought a woman, I guess, has come forward on a forum saying that that was about her. She was a little bit younger than Cindy. She was in high school, and her boyfriend would do that all over town. So I'm not sure which is true. That would be nuts if it's that big of a coincidence that this teenage girl's boyfriend would spray that on the side of a window facing the desk of another Cindy. These strange occurrences had Cindy terrified, and for good reason. I'd be terrified too. So to ease her mind, her employers installed a buzzer on her desk. I believe if you hit the buzzer, it called 911, but don't quote me on that. About a month after her disappearance, a detective on her case, William Adams, received a strange phone call. It was a woman, and she was whispering, and she told him that Cindy was being held captive in the basement of a White House. And when he asked for more information, she hung up quickly. Not long after, the woman called again, whispering. She said that it was actually 2 White Houses next to each other owned by the same family. Now this family was out of town except for the son, and he's the one that had kidnapped Cindy and had her in his basement. When Detective Adams tried to get another police officer to get on the line, it was like the lady knew and she hung up quickly. After that, he made a public plea for her to call back. Personally, This isn't a decision I would have made, but again, I'm not a detective. I'm not a police officer. I just feel like more than likely if somebody did kidnap Cindy, they're not telling a lot of people. So if somebody's calling, leaving legitimate tips, they're going to know who it is. And when the police announce it to the world, they're also announcing it to the kidnapper and possible murderer, who is going to either go after this woman, or this woman's going to shut up real quick because she's afraid that this man is going to go after her. But again, I'm not a professional. This is just what I feel. Unfortunately, about 2 years later, in 1983, Cindy's mother died of cancer. She was buried on Cindy's birthday. And in 2008, Cindy's father died. From what I understand, before that, he refused to declare Cindy legally dead. Throughout the years, there have been several suspects in Cindy's disappearance, and none of them have officially been ruled out. 2 suspects were Anthony and Nathaniel Cook. They were 2 brothers who went around Ohio in the 80s. They murdered, I think, about 9 people between the 2 of them, but they have adamantly denied having anything to do with her disappearance, which, from what I understand, when they would murder somebody, they would leave them there and take off. They wouldn't hide them, they wouldn't bury them, anything like that, and they have never found a body for Cindy. This was something actually that the Trace Evidence podcast pointed out, and I completely agree with. Another 2 suspects are Jose Rodriguez Jr. and Richard Neller. Now, Richard Neller worked at the same law office that Cindy did, and Jose Rodriguez was his client. Now, Rodriguez and Neller were involved in a bunch of shady business together, including drugs. In fact, they went to both of them ended up going to prison for different offenses. And the theory is she overheard something between the 2, a conversation between the 2 that she shouldn't have heard, and they felt they had to kill her to cover it up. There's actually an informant, Scott Kelly Hanson, who testified in Rodriguez's 1995 trial that Rodriguez had told him in prison that Cindy had overheard something she wasn't supposed to hear. So Rodriguez murdered her. Now, his testimony was ruled inadmissible by the judge, which I can see why. Hanson was a robber, and even when he was let out in witness protection, I believe for another case, he didn't stay on the straight and narrow for long. He ended up robbing people again, and he got thrown back in prison. Well, at one point he was able to, and I'm not sure how you would do this in prison, but he was able to make fraudulent papers to get him released, which of course they caught him again. So I see why the judge would think that his testimony is not reliable, but at the same time, this man could have been telling the truth. I guess we won't know, or we won't know for a while. I hope we find out. A third theory is that she ran away from her strict family. But this one doesn't make sense to me because she seemed pretty religious herself. She signed up herself to go to Bible school. She was surrounded by her family, her friends, and her boyfriend, and she was happy. And her family doesn't believe it either because they fully believe that if she would have left voluntarily, that she would have been at her mother's funeral in '83 when she passed away, because that's who Cindy was. Something to keep in mind is that about 3 weeks before her disappearance, a woman named Gloria Krause, a mother, disappeared while she was out grocery shopping, and her body was found weeks later in a random field in Michigan. Cindy's case is the longest active missing persons case in Toledo, Ohio. When Cindy went missing, she was 5'4" and she weighed 115 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes. When Cindy went missing, she was wearing a white V-neck dress with pink pinstripes. She was also wearing cinnamon brown legs pantyhose and beige open-toed sandals. She had on a sapphire ring and a gold watch, and she was carrying a brown purse with her. She had a chickenpox scar on her forehead. She also had a scar on the inside of her right knee that was about 1.5 inches long and shaped like a fish hook. If you know anything about Cindy's disappearance, please call the Toledo Police Department at 419-245-3151, and I'll also leave the phone number down in the description box below. If you have a Midwest true crime case you'd like me to cover, please drop a comment. I love suggestions. If you like my content, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and until next time.